we did that today. We did a do now activity today. So that was a great example of basically anything that you have done in a face-to-face classroom, you can do it in a virtual setting. It's going to be different, like Marty said. It's going to take a little bit more planning, a little bit more organization, but you can do it. Any of those activities that you think of, the issue is just going to be, how do I want the students to do it? I have to think through that ahead of time. I have to think through, how do I want them to respond? How do I want to give feedback? There's all these different components to it that just have to be thought of ahead of time. But you don't have to give up your favorite strategy to be able to do virtual teaching. So I want to be really clear with that. Even hands-on, there are so many tools out there to do some hands-on work, and we'll talk about that. So before we get kind of really going in high gear today, one of the things that I find helps with some confidence building, at least when I first started learning this, was just not feeling like I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed when it came to virtual learning. And that comes down to terminology. A lot of times when we don't understand the terminology, we feel like we're not as good as other teachers because we don't understand what they're talking about. So I want to go over a few things when it comes to virtual terminology. The first is the term LMS, right? In education, we love acronyms. So Learning Management System. In different states and districts, everybody uses something differently. Some people use what's called Canvas. There's Blackboard, there's Schoology, there's Google Classroom. There's all these things. But what I will use for you guys today is I'm going to use a shipping analogy. All a learning management system is a shipping container. It is where you're going to house everything you want to use. So everything you want to teach with, no matter what the tool is, goes in an LMS, okay? For our session today, we're using what I would call an LMS, and that is our action agenda. Our action agenda is housing everything that we're going to use today, okay? So that's what it is. Don't get worried and fired up about, I don't understand Canvas, or I don't understand Schoology. I hear all these different things. It really doesn't matter. They all operate at basically the same way. You can link all your work together in one location. And that's what you want to do with an LMS. The second big block of terminology that people get hung up on are the apps or the tools. And here's the scenario about this. An app or a tool is what I would call a shipping box, right? If I'm going to ship something, I'm going to fill that container with 10 boxes, 20 boxes, 30 boxes. It really doesn't matter how many boxes I have. It's however many boxes I want to ship. So this is the great secret. You can control the number of boxes you ship. You don't have to be an expert at everything. We're going to encourage you today, as you go through this journey, to only pick one or two things in the beginning and get good at that. And that's it. But just so you know, the popular apps or tools that are out there are Padlet, Nearpod, ClassKick, which is an SREB favorite. ClassKick is our favorite. Flipgrid, Screencastify, Desmos. If you do something with a lot of math, Desmos is fabulous. Pear Deck, and so forth. Again, there's Edpuzzle. There's all kinds of different apps out there. I could keep going on and on and on. But I just want you to understand that no one wants you to learn all of them. Nobody can learn all of them. You find the one that works for you. And then the last piece of terminology we're going to talk about are meeting platforms. So think of the meeting platform as the ship. It's how I'm going to get the cargo to students. It's how I'm going to get all the information to them. So today we are using Zoom. We are using Zoom as a meeting platform. There's Teams, which you guys use, and we're going to talk about Teams later today. There's WebEx, and there's other types of meeting platforms out there. So we will talk a little about Teams, but we're delivering in Zoom today. One thing I do want to say is all the tools in the meeting platforms may be a little different between each platform, but overall, they all have similar tools that we're going to show you. So it'll be okay that we show you in Zoom because you'll be able to use it in Teams as well. Marta, you have anything you want to add to that slide?
No, I'm good right now.
Okay, perfect. So again, when you're thinking about terminology, the other part that people are kind of worried about is what does this mean to be synchronous or asynchronous? And one of my concerns is that a lot of people think asynchronous is canned curriculum, and that's just not true. All it means is that synchronous means the teacher and the students are working at the same time. So you have them in a live setting. Asynchronous is anything you want them to do when you're not working with them in a live setting, okay? So as CTE teachers, we really need to think and prioritize what are those things that we have to be face-to-face with them? What are those skills that we have to cover face-to-face? And then what are the things that they can go work on in an asynchronous environment and then come back to me? So that's important because what we know about virtual learning is the honest truth is it can be overstimulating. And if you're struggling, guess what? Students are struggling, parents are struggling because there's a lot of stuff going on. So you cannot be synchronous all the time. You have to set up opportunities for students to be able to do work in an asynchronous way. So they made an asynchronous example, maybe they could be using a flip grid or a video to film themselves working on an engine part and sending it to you to see if it's correct. You know, that's a great way to do an asynchronous lesson. That's just an example. But synchronous is where you're getting them that content and you really want to be with them in person. And the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to an overall understanding of technology is don't be stressed out by thinking you have to do all the bells and whistles. Are low tech, intermediate tech, and high tech options. One of my favorite analogies with this is if you go to work out, if you go to the YMCA, if you go to the gym and you go to work out, they always tell you in a workout class, you can do it like me and do all the jumping jacks, right? Or you can do a low impact version and not do the jumping jacks. You don't have to jump. Tech is the same way. So everything we show you, everything you learn about, you can do it a low tech option. A low tech option is just using the chat like we've done today, right? Pretty simple. Just chat about it. Other examples of low tech, I actually have had students where I ask them to write their notes or draw something and then show me in the camera or take a picture of it and send it to me. That's low tech, okay? We don't have to have all the bells and whistles. Intermediate tech is when you start getting a little bit better at this and you can have them load videos. You can create links like I did in your agenda, right? That's a little bit a step up. I can create links to different things. And then high tech is when you use all those apps we talked about. High tech is, they actually have a term called app smashing, where I use different apps and have different students doing different things. And it can get really big, but we don't have to go that big. You need to start with baby steps. Pick one or two things that work for you and then learn something new later on. And the term leverage is one I want you to get used to. We don't like to use the word technology very often. We like to talk about leveraging digital tools, because just because a piece of technology, a tool is good for somebody else, does not mean it works for you. So you need to leverage those tools that you want to use for the type of class you teach. A really good, if you're a reader and you like to go straight to the source, I do encourage you reading Deep Learning. It's a Michael Fullan book, and it has a lot of great examples about how to leverage digital tools, okay? So, few helpful hints today when it comes to technology. These are the things that nobody tells you, right? First thing, devices matter. You need to know what your students are using. Are they using a regular laptop? Are they using a Chromebook? Are they using an iPad? Because things that I teach you today and that the rest of the staff work with you on are not universal on certain devices. For example, something I'm going to show you later, I'm going to talk about the toolbar being at the top, but on an iPad, it's on the bottom, right? So we don't want to confuse students or ourselves. Know about devices. Ask people, what are they on? When you're teaching from home, a second monitor really helps, because right now, if you're on a laptop right now, you're having a hard time pulling up the chat, pulling up the agenda, looking at the Zoom, looking at our pictures. There's a lot going on. So I do recommend having a second monitor, but here's a really quick fix. Right now, I'm talking to all of you through my TV because I have an HDMI cord that hooks from my laptop to my television, and I have 2 monitors. So there's a real easy fix. You don't have to go out and buy something. But I recommend that if you're teaching from home to have 2 monitors so you don't have to toggle back and forth between a whole bunch of stuff. We talked a little bit about video streaming already. Many of you have experienced that. Anytime you do use videos, I always say have a plan B in case internet is slow. You have to intentionally teach the technology. If you want students to use chat, or if you want students to use a certain tool, you need to explain it to them. I always recommend making tutorial videos or having a pre-session like this one, which is what we're doing to teach you the tools. And the #1 rule about virtual learning is Murphy's Law. If it can go wrong, it will. Everything in a virtual setting, no matter how many sessions I've done, guys, something happens every time. By the way, this morning, we had a huge problem because Zoom did an update last night and nobody could log on to our session this morning that we had. So there's an example. You cannot plan for everything in a virtual setting. So we always want you to be solution oriented. Plan B, sometimes even plan C. So for example, I will tell all of you, if you get booted off, come right back in because I'm going to let you back in. I've had about 10 people get booted off and come back in because they lost connection. Don't panic. But you're not the only one, and it's going to happen. Right, Marty? It happens all the time to us, doesn't it?
All the time.
Yes. But the pretty little secret about virtual learning, even though you can do it, there's nothing wrong. You don't have to learn all this great stuff. There's easily done. It takes 3 times the amount of planning. And this is where the teachers put their head in their hand and go, are you kidding me? And I'm going to say no. It takes me 3 times as long to take that same lesson that I plan for face-to-face as it does for virtual, because you have to plan ahead for all of the different pieces and things that happen. It requires a delivery of resources in advance. It requires me to have that agenda ready for you with all the links loaded so that the class can move, okay? It requires that you learn from failures. Every time I do this, I get better, but that's because I learned the last time when something went wrong that I needed to plan for it, okay? Just letting you guys know. All right, so we're gonna plan our first activity. We're gonna talk about Zoom breakouts in just a second. In order to talk about Zoom breakouts, you're going to learn your first tool, and that's annotation. So I want you to find the toolbar first. Don't try to annotate yet, but find the toolbar. At the top of your screen, if you were on a laptop, if you hover at the top, you should see view options. If you click on view options, you should see annotate. When you see annotate, a toolbar will come up, and I'm gonna want you to choose a stamp in just a minute, If you are on an iPad, the annotate is the pencil at the bottom of the screen. If you're on Chromebook, you may not be able to annotate unless you have an extension that your district bought for annotation. But guess what? We are very, we are very compliant, and we want to make sure that we have access and equity for everybody. So if you cannot find the annotate toolbar, then you can put your answers in chat as we go through this. So I just want to let everybody know the annotate toolbar is what we're going to be using. And I am going to go ahead and clear the screen. I want you to find your annotate toolbar and find your stamp. And I'd like you to take this poll. The following things are things that we're going to talk about today. And I'd like you to rate each one of them. Chat, private chat, breakout rooms, screen share, annotation on whiteboard, annotation on slides, polls, and how to rename yourself. So just let us know. You don't have a clue about it, you've heard a little bit about it, you've tried it, or you use it regularly. Where are you? If you can't annotate, you can put it in chat. Marty, what are we looking like?
We are looking at, actually quite a few people have tried or used many of the features. And then it's kind of across the board. A few haven't had a clue. Actually, it's filling up. It looks pretty balanced. Looks like we have just about the same of everybody.
Look at that.
Yeah.
It's pretty balanced, isn't it?
It is.
And some people are probably just having fun using the stamp for the first time. This is great. So we've just shown you, if you wrote not a clue for annotation on slides, guess what? You just tried it. So that's what this is. This is what's called annotating on a slide. All I did was I had a PowerPoint slide ready, set up with this table, and I did a formative assessment with you guys, and I had you put a stamp to tell me where you're at. This is a great way to start class, to figure out where everybody is, especially when we're talking about relationships with students. It's a great way to get a little social emotional learning, get a check-in. How's everybody feeling today? Relationship building. This is a great way, a great tool to use. So I still see a lot of people are loving using the annotation, but as you'll notice in the room, I'm going to try to cover, you are a typical classroom. We got everybody from each end of the spectrum that knows how to do this stuff to people who don't know anything about it. So I'm going to try to cover it for all of you. Okay, so now, if you will, please close your annotate bar right now. And I'm going to clear all the drawings, because if you don't close your annotate bar, here's the other little trick. The kids can now annotate all over your slides for the remainder of the presentation. You can, and we'll talk about that, but you can set settings to block annotate or turn on annotate. Those are settings you can use. But annotate's a cool little thing. So here's all the things we're going to review today. We've talked about chat already. When you set up a Zoom meeting, just like when you set a Teams meeting or anything else, they give you all kinds of settings to choose from. There are differences between the free version and the pay version. I do want to tell you that. So sometimes certain things you have access to in the pay version that you don't have access to in the free version. Zoom, I want to just give a plug for that they did up their security a while back after the first fiasco they had. And all of these meeting platforms allow for waiting rooms or passcodes to be entered so you can control who comes in and out of your synchronous meeting. In Zoom settings, like I did today, I can mute you all. I can unmute you all, or I can allow you to mute yourself. A lot of teachers tell me when they first start teaching virtual that they're nervous because of classroom management, right? How do I control this? There's more control than you think. You have ways to control this, and muting is one. You can save all the chats. So while I may not be able to stop, I can tell students that they can't chat. I can turn off chat. But if I want them to use chat, I may not be able to stop them from saying something, but I can print it and save it, and then consequences can follow, you know. But I'm letting you know you do have control over that chat room. You can decide who can screen share. You can decide to allow backgrounds. We've had a lot of teachers comment about backgrounds. I highly encourage school districts to create backgrounds with the school logo and give those to students, because a lot of students are embarrassed about their house, or their room is distracting, or there's other issues that you don't want to see going on behind them. So allowing them to have a school virtual background is a great tool to use. Otherwise, you may see a lot of kids in some strange backgrounds if you don't. And Zoom recordings can be saved. So that's something just to remember. You can save all of your meetings, and you can link them on your management page, whatever you're using, so that people can find them again. All right, so we're going to start with a chat activity. And Kathleen, if you'll help me monitor this, I would really help. So
Absolutely.
Reflect on a concept that you teach where it might be beneficial to use the chat box, and a concern that you might have about chat. And we've addressed a couple of them, but you might have more concerns than what we've said already. So in the chat box, if you'll type B for a benefit of chat and a C for a concern about chat as it pertains to what you teach. And I'll stop and let Kathleen help with that.
Fingers are
Wait time is
flying.
much harder, right, Kathleen?
Yeah.
Wait time is harder
Mr.
for
Odom was the
virtual.
first out of the gate. Ron, thanks for being the pace setter. He gave us a B.
Okay.
All right.
What's your B? Give
Well,
us there you go.
he'll tell us.
Benefits, student input.
Ron, you can
Good.
chat, or Mr. Odom is dreamy. Oh, Chef Brown.
Ah.
Students can interact with each other. Excellent, excellent. Yes, serious interaction.
Ooh,
Yep,
look.
good job, just like communication. Thank you, Mr. Ball. Perfect. Oh, Mr. Gerda, who's their math talent. He's like, how do you use the symbols of math? Student, yep, interaction. People are all over that. Yep. Yep. Getting their perspective, right? So students having ownership and getting in. Yep. Maintaining classroom interaction. Love it, love it. Yep. But then on the flip side, there's the distraction, right? There's the interaction, but then there's the potential distraction. Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
And you can turn off private chats between students, by the way. That can be turned off.
Yep. Interaction and feedback.
Not that it stops them from texting each other.
Love it, love it. Yep. So lots of the benefits, a lot around interaction, and yep. And keeping it keeping the spirit of collaboration like in the live classroom going, which is perfect, right? Simulated workplace student meetings, which is huge. You know, how do we keep those going? And this is the way to do it. Okay,
Look at
so
Bob's comment. Kathleen, Bob's comment's awesome.
Yep, go for it. Yep. So
Yeah.
Bob is saying the ability to send private messages and chat to the teacher to overcome hesitation, right? So if you have students that tend to be shyer and they don't jump in and they're not the loud ones, they can, yeah, love that. Ooh, Jennifer, thank you. Immediate feedback. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. But a concern could be that students could get off task. Oh, Sarah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and I want to address, Kathleen, what Skip said, because students who are already overstimulated normally, this is even more on top of that. So you do have to consider at what point is it too much. So you have to pick and choose when you want to use chat, right? You have to set up norms of when it's expected, because you're right, it can be too much.
Hey, Amy, I'm going to throw something in about private chat. Last week, I was working with some teachers in Ohio, and private chat has its concerns. However, we used it with a structured way for feedback for peer assessment. So students sent private chat, but we gave them a very structured sequence of constructive feedback of how they would do it. And then, of course, they knew that the teacher could save those private chats and use that as, did you actually communicate and collaborate with your partner? And that seemed to work out pretty well.
Yes. Once you explain it, I think that's a great point, Marty. If you set the norms and expectations and they understand that those things are how they're going to be assessed and looked at, then you don't seem to have as many issues with the off-task behavior in the chat. So great participation, guys. Thank you. And then said there was that private chat. So right now in your chat box at the bottom, it says to everyone, and that's how we can all see your chat. But let's say you wanted to send one of us a private chat, you could click on that everyone and choose the person you want to send a private chat to. So pick somebody. I would love for y'all to practice that one time. Just pick somebody and send a private chat to somebody in the room and see how that looks for you. So what you're going to notice is that on the main screen, it doesn't come up to everybody else. It'll be in red on the chat. It'll say it's a private message, and you and that person are the only one that see it, except when we print the chat, when we save the chat, then the person who saves it, the host, can see it. But the reason I always like you to practice doing that is because of this next part. Here's the big caveat I want you to know. If you send a private message, you need to go back to the two and click off of them and click back on everyone to participate in the next chat. What happens every time I do one of these, it's so funny, and I'm not kidding you, the next chat we have, someone's gonna do this, they're gonna try to respond to everybody and it comes directly to me because they sent me the last private chat. So I do wanna warn you, if you do private chat, it doesn't automatically go back to everyone. Okay. Another really cool tool that you may want to use are reaction tools. So at the bottom of your toolbar, you have something called participants. And I have participants pulled up, and I would love for you to pull participants up. At the bottom of your participant screen, when it comes up, you have some different things you can use. You can tell me to go slower. You could tell me to go faster. I could do a quick poll. Everybody could respond yes or no, right? Yes or no to a question. You can also click on the more button. There's a thumbs up, there's a thumbs down, there's a clap. And one of our favorites is the coffee break, which is gonna happen soon, I promise. But the coffee break means, hey, we need a break, you're killing me, this has gone on too long, right? So we're gonna test this out. I would love everybody to select a reaction. If you can select the thumbs up and shoot me a thumbs up, I know that you've just aced this part of the virtual workshop. I'm waiting for them to come in. Oh, Kathleen, you weren't kidding about this group. I've already gotten 25 with thumbs up. They found it that fast. This is a good group, okay? So about half of you didn't do it. Does it maybe that you said Amy's boring and yet I stopped listening to her, or it may be that you can already do it. But if you can't do it, if you stay on afterwards, I'll be glad to show it to you. Again, anything I show you, don't panic if you can't do it. We will help you one-on-one at the end. I'm going to clear those now. Good job, guys. I'm using the thumbs up and thumbs down reaction toolbar. If you're the host in Zoom, you can set up collaborative work groups for your students. You can set up a breakout room for all of your students. You will not see the breakout room on your toolbar unless you're the host. I do want to clarify that because I usually get a lot of questions going, where's the breakout room? You're not going to see it unless you are in charge of the meeting, okay? But I wanted to show you this screen just so you can see. When I choose the breakout rooms, it tells me, it allows me to assign how many people I want per room or per group. So you could do like 4 people per group. You could do 5 people per group. You can do whatever you want. I can also manually assign people. I could say, hey, I've got 5 student leaders, right? Let's say I'm a maintenance teacher, or I'm doing architecture, a construction teacher, and I have 3 foremen, and I want to do 3 groups, and I want to assign 1 foreman to each group. You can manually do that. So I just want to let you know that as well. And then when I create the breakout rooms, it looks like this over here on the right. And each breakout room comes up. I can move people, switch people between breakout rooms, and I can set it up. When I open all the rooms, then they will get invites, and you're going to see this in just a minute. You're going to get an invite to a breakout room, and then that tells you that you can go off and work in those rooms individually without me. So this is what I see as the host. If you'll notice, I renamed rooms, like that room, I wanted to call it Red Room 5 or Blue Room 1. We can rename these rooms anything we want, and we can move people. Hey, look, Marty, you're in that room right there. So you can move people. You can see there's 8 people in a room. You can see how many people in a room when you use your breakouts. Some assigning tips, okay? You can look at the participant list and have people rename or select a group they want to be in, okay? And we'll show you how to do that in a second. But you can actually say, hey, all right, Marty, rename yourself group 1 if you want to be in group 1. And then that helps me put people in groups. So you can assign them or allow self-selection. Again, teachers have control. You can call everybody back to the main room. You can send out a mass message to everybody in their rooms. You can control the amount of time. You can set the time and bring people back. The only challenge that we see to breakout rooms is if you lose internet connections. They have to come back to the main room, and then the host or the teacher has to manually put them back in the room they were in. That's the only issue, is if you lose connection, there is a problem with that, okay? So, I want you to think about some breakout room basics. If you were gonna set a whole bunch of students in a collaborative workspace together, what are some of those norms that you set up for students working together? Do you identify roles for students? How do you monitor what students do? And what's the expected product or an outcome from group work? So go back and think and self-reflect in your classroom in a normal setting. How do you manage group work? And I'm just going to be quiet for about 30 seconds and let you think about that before we go to our next session on breakouts. So one way that we monitor, and thank you, Jerry, time limits is important. One way that we really at SREB like to make sure that things get done in group work is setting roles and setting job duties. So in just a minute, I'm going to put you in a breakout room and I'm going to ask you guys to select roles. The roles that we found are most beneficial in a virtual breakout are timekeeper, facilitator, technoscribe. That's the new term for the person that takes notes, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about technoscribe. And then reporter, the person who's going to report out after the group work. You can create whatever roles you want. We found that these 4 are very beneficial to collaborative work. Technoscribe is different because usually that person has to really be able to utilize the technology, either the slides or the app, or they've got to be able to fill something out. So that's really important to have that role. A quick trick, and I know Kathleen may, and Marty may want to kind of jump in here too, but this is one of Kathleen's favorite things to talk about, is you can let students pick roles or you can assign roles. And if you are working in work-based simulation or any kind of place in a CTSO where you have roles, this is a great place for you to have maybe meetings ahead of time to set up those job duties and expectations. So if you have certain people that are going to be the facilitator, then you can tell them how you want them to facilitate. Kathleen, you want to say a little more about that?
No, I think that's spot on. James or Tim might want to jump in here too, because they're really deep. You know, so James Rumsey and the other folks we have online here are forerunners in simulated workplace, right? So one of the powerful protocols are those industry reflected roles that they take on. So whether you have a tool manager, whether you have a safety manager, you've got a foreman, you've got a floor nurse, you know, you have those roles that make sense for the industry. So now all we're doing is sort of pushing those boundaries out a bit and encouraging students to think about the power of the roles they have with you normally. And now they can also take on roles for the virtual environment that they're working in. This is an extension of their lab, right? This is an extension of their lab. So they're still going to need roles. And so it's a great current skill for all these students to be able to manage and take on responsibility in a virtual meeting setting as well. Tim, James, anything to add? Or the other department folks, or Frank or Veronica?
I'd like to add something, Kathleen, that one of the things we're seeing with some of our CTE schools around the United States, at least I've worked with, is when you have a mixed class, maybe I have juniors and seniors, they're letting the senior take on the role of facilitator using a leadership rubric to assess that student in terms of their leadership skills. And then the other 3 students are kind of like the work teams of simulated workplace. And then they rotate this so that every student, you do 4 breakout rooms over a period of time, every student has to take on each of the roles. And they've created an assessment for that. So that's been really interesting on how teachers and CTE are coming up with like a system to try to balance it and make students learn all 4 roles.
Excellent. Thank you, Marty, so much. So for the next activity that we're going to do, you're going to be assigned to a breakout room. If you look on the right-hand side, you're going to get a pop-up on your screen that's going to invite you to a breakout room, okay? Again, I've circled it. Please make sure you know what your room number is in case you lose your internet connection and you need to be put back in your group. Always remember that. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see 2 options when you go into breakout. You will see return to main session, which is in blue, and you'll see leave meeting, which is in red. So when it's time to end our breakout room, you're going to want to click the blue return to main session. If you click the red leave meeting, it will cause you to completely leave our session. But what did I tell you in the beginning? Don't panic. If you accidentally click it, come on back in and we'll put you back in. But just want to remind you, you want to return back to the main room at the end of a breakout. The other thing is, while you're in breakout, if you're struggling, you have two options. You can invite Kathleen into the room to help you. You can ask her a question and say, hey, we need help. So students can do this as well, help. Or you can return to the main room and we can help you from there, okay? So just always want to remind you of those things. So here is your activity. I'm going to go over the directions, okay? Here's the directions. You're going to click join when you get the breakout invite. I want you to remember your room number. Please make sure when you go into the breakout room that you're unmuted. If your internet's doing okay, please share your video as well, right? Because we want you to be able to talk in a breakout room. Usually video does better in the smaller breakout rooms anyway. We want you to just, after you introduce yourselves, we want you to identify roles. So 4 of you need to pick a role: facilitator, technoscribe, timekeeper, and reporter. And then after you've done that, we just want you to brainstorm some ideas for norms, expectations, and communicating expectations to our students about virtual learning. What are some of those norms and expectations? Now that you've heard some of this, you think, hey, we need to communicate and we need to set these norms for our students. This is a low-tech activity. My technoscribe, all I need you to do is take notes with a pencil and paper or pen and paper. Got it? So you don't have to do anything else but take notes if you're the technoscribe. Pretty cool, huh? So Kathleen, anything else you want to add before we go to our breakout rooms about our activity?
No, I think that's very clear. We can ask folks if there are questions, they could either raise their hand or put it in the chat. We will establish a time. It usually is nice if you are the, one driving the whole world, like Amy. She'll set a time, and then the timekeepers can get in there and work it from their end. And then what's nice is if you're controlling your breakout rooms, you can send messages to the groups, your students, while they're in their breakouts, reminding them how much time they have left. So let's see if anybody else has questions. Marty is going to drive the breakout rooms. I suggested we do about 6 rooms. So your numbers will be somewhere between 1 and 6. Amy, do you have a certain number of minutes you'd like to?
I would like, so we're gonna give them 8 minutes.
Okay.
We're gonna give them 8 minutes to participate in this. Again, you're introducing, setting roles, and brainstorming ideas around norms and expectations for virtual learning. Okay?
Okay.
We're ready when you are, Kathleen.
All right. Perfect. Thank you, Marty.
You got it.
Excellent. So it should be there. So accept the invitation and go to your breakout room. If you don't see the invitation, you could also go to the bottom of your toolbar, hit more, and find breakouts, and the invitation will be there. Let's see, Bob or Benita, do you have any concerns, or can we help you get to one?
Amy is going to, after break, she's going to share strategically, and Tim and James from the Department of Ed can help too, about how this can be a great complement to teens, because we recognize that West Virginia is a teens state. There is some benefit to having both of these in your world. So I think the charge was in the breakout rooms, hoping you had some time to say hello to each other, and we are establishing roles. And then we asked you to really think through the idea of norms and what would be good to set up. How could you frame it so that students are using breakouts efficiently? So I'd like to just encourage you just for a moment. Yes, sorry about that. I'll explain that in a second. There's a few reflection questions on the screen. Okay. So what was easy about breakouts? Let's start there. And let's see if, let's start there about what's easy and what's difficult. And maybe Marty, you could put a little easy sign in the chat for me. So I'm asking Marty that the chat can be a really effective way to keep notes on what your students are getting and what they're not. So I'm asking him to flag the chat by putting the word easy in there. And I'm going to ask you folks to drop some thoughts in the chat room about what was easy about breakouts. Thank you, Marty. All right, let those fly. And technoscribes, we will get to you. Don't you worry. Yeah, let's see who has some thoughts to add. Marty, what's coming in for us on the chat?
Oh, you're muted, Marty.
Let's see here. Smaller groups, easier management, interaction between participants, getting in and out of the room was very easy. The ability to communicate and talk to everybody, very easy.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yep. Thank you so much. Absolutely. So the fact that they are smaller groups and it allows you, and you can also think about strategically the idea of breakouts around task, right? Around very specific different things that students are doing. So there's a lot of power in breakout rooms, but you're absolutely right. Easier to manage, more intimate interaction, tend to have people more comfortable sharing. Okay, so thank you, Marty. If you could put in the chat, if you could drop the next marker, which is what is difficult about breakouts? And feel free to throw in there your ideas. Let's see what resonates with you. What is difficult about breakout rooms?
Connectivity, the digital or the communication digitally, audio, yep. Talking over people, getting everybody to participate. Participate.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yes, Mr. Ball, thank you.
Yeah.
I see that one. Yep. Yeah. So that idea of the sweet spot of how much time is too much time, how much time is enough time. Thank you, Marty, for calling some of those out. And thank you, Paul, for your thoughts too. Those were very interesting. Yeah, relying on tech. You're right, Mr. Lance. Like Amy said, technology can be really difficult in terms of, you know, it enables us to do this, but it tends to come with challenges. So yeah, were you successful at job duty assignments? You know, it is funny because we act just like the students do. Sometimes we get ourselves in these groups and nobody wants to take on. You know which one always goes first? Which job is always the first one taken?
Timekeeper.
Timekeeper. Right. Classic, right? It's classic. It's like, I'll be the timekeeper. Okay, so then I'm off the hook, right? Which is actually brilliant. You got to love those folks that jump all over that. Right, but you know, without a facilitator and without a technoscribe, it gets tough to move the work along. So that's why norms are very, very important. So I'd love to cold call some of our technoscribes to share out about the norms that you came up with. So let's start, and I think we had, Marty, we did have 6 breakout rooms. Is that correct? You can show me with your thumb if that was, or more. Yes, thank you. Okay, 6 breakout rooms. So I'm gonna go right down the center and a little bit to the left and call on breakout room number 4. Who's our technoscribe? Breakout room number 4.
Or the reporter.
Oh, I'm so sorry, they're a reporter. Share with us if you can. It would be great for you to unmute yourself, or you can certainly use the chat.
Actually, because you didn't specify that we each had to take a different role, we all decided to become timekeepers. To be honest.
Mr. Gerda. You know, it's like, Amy, we just can't, you can't predict all the craziness that's going to happen.
Spicy. And this is a great poignant moment for why we have to worry about norms and expectations for students and what we have to communicate clearly.
Yes, thank you, David. All right, so we will move to group number, while I'm thinking about that, how to troubleshoot that for next time. Let's try group number 2. Group number 2. Who do we have?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Ware.
Okay, good. Apparently, when you brought me out into group number 2, my audio and video did not work, so I had to use my phone. But when I did finally join 4 months later, what we came up with was how to engage student participation and making sure to have an agenda. If you don't have an agenda, I'm guessing things can go haywire pretty quickly. So that was one thing we discussed. And how to keep students from playing around. How do you set that standard so you don't have folks, becoming all, what was it, timekeepers? Is that what they did in group number 4? So that's pretty much it from what we came up with.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Ware. Thank you for fighting through the technology. And you've had some lovely supportive comments coming from your colleagues. You gotta love it. Okay, one more group before we take a break. So how about group number 6? Tell us what you came up with to add to those ideas. Let's see if there's any new ideas that we could capitalize on from Mr. Ware's group about having an agenda and the roles. Paul, are you the reporter?
Yes, ma'am. We came up with some good stuff, but some of it was stuff based on experience and some was based on what we had kind of been given by others. Like, kind of set out the rules. It'd be a good idea to make a list of the rules, and I thought to send them out to the students in an email. And it was things like, hey, respect each other. When you talk, use proper terminology, what kind of background, clothing as far as personal attire, and, having a good attitude. And then the communication expectations, I guess they can use chats, submissions, and reactions.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Thank you, Mr. Wow, that was group number, you were number 6, right? Group number 6. Way to bring it. I love it. I love it.
Excellent.
And this idea of like mise en place for our chefs in the group and foodies, and the idea of simulated workplace, being prepared. It's the same idea of thinking about being prepared for their virtual classroom, right? So I love that you talked about, the idea of respect, the idea of kind of being ready for their meetings in terms of, what they're wearing and just making sure they're present, and Zoom does have benefits. So being prepared from the waist up is actually most important, but, we'll take the whole student. So thank you so much. So appreciate that. Well done. So be thinking about the power of breakout rooms and how this might be an added benefit to your use of Teams as a management system for your virtual classrooms. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, there's more from Amy and Marty. And so let me set a time, and we will, let's see, 2:16. Let's take a good solid 6 minutes. 6 minutes? Oh, 5 minutes. Oh, can we?
Had a 5-minute timer set.
Oh, I'm sorry. 5 minutes is it. 5 minutes
That's
is
all right.
great. Okay. So take a
All
moment,
right.
walk away from your system, and we'll see you in 5. Thank you. Sorry, Amy.
Yeah, that's all right. Funny.
Running a tight ship here.
Have to.
How about it?
All right.
I literally have 2 more minutes before I got to start. I lost connection, all kinds of stuff. I'm telling you. Oh dear, was it Mike? Was it? No, I've been on this the whole time on purpose because you warned me, so I got on that. But it's slow, so I'm struggling. How did I mute this? All right. Let me stop. Okay. We are back. Let's see. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Now that's a tough one.
My connection is better this time. I did some fixes while we were gone.
Awesome. That 5 minutes is tough, Amy. Woo.
I know, I know. Let's see, hold on a second. If it's
Thank you, though.
There we go. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. Hope you got a little bit of a stretch break. One thing that I did want to add to a breakout tip is renaming yourself. And that's just something I like to give, especially when you're trying to do specific. So again, if you're doing that simulated workplace learning and you have specific groups working in specific areas. It's really easy to help you, as this is a teacher hack kind of thing, teacher tip, in that you can easily put your kids in specific groups if you allow them to rename themselves. So I want you to practice doing this right now. And what I would love for you to do is, if you hover over the picture of yourself, you have two ways. You can either hover over the picture of yourself, an ellipsis will come up and you can rename yourself, or you can go to the participant list, find yourself and hit more, and that will rename yourself. But I would love for all of you to put your area that you teach in front of your name. So let's practice that now and see how many of you can rename yourself. So again, you either hover over your name or picture and you go to the ellipsis and hit rename, or you can go to the participant list, find your name, hit more, and rename yourself. So look at that. Kyle's welding. Good job. Look at that. Business, Bowman. Love it. Chef. We got chef in there. We got all kinds of people. We have, English. We have an English person. Excellent. Graphic design, health science, English. Beautiful, guys. Way to go. So I just love showing this little tip. It's one of those things that's so simple, but if you would love for kids to self-select what group they're in or tell you something, they can rename themselves and you can put them in the appropriate group. We've done this with hundreds of participants, and I was able to put like all of the culinary arts teachers in one group this way and that type of thing. So it really does help out a lot. Anyway, we're going to move on a little bit from breakout rooms, and we're going to talk about, if it's not working on the iPad, I got that. Yeah, iPads sometimes don't allow you to do some of the same tools, so don't worry about that if you can't. And it's just, and that's why I said
Amy,
know your devices, right?
Amy, is it true that for Brian and his iPad, we can rename him?
Yes, and that's
all right.
a great.
So if I may take liberties, I think I could have a really good time with this. So could I rename Brian?
You could, and Kathleen brings up a good point where we said,
Let me do that.
And have a plan C. Yeah, you can do that easily. We do this all the time. If you can't rename yourself because of the device you're on, then the host can rename you. So what have you renamed Brian?
Well, I could be, this is a moment of like a moral struggle for me. No. Okay, I'm the consummate professional, so I'm going to rename Brian, but there have been several ideas that have crossed my mind. Oh, he's hilarious. Here we go. So automotive master.
Automotive master, that's pretty good.
There we go.
Brian, ready to play, watch out. There you go.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out though that you can help if students can't rename, you can do it for them.
You can do it yourself. That's a great point. Yeah. Thank you. So
that was fun.
Some other common Zoom tools that you would want to use, and again, this can be used in other meeting platforms. One is screen sharing, which right now I am screen sharing my PowerPoint with you. So that's what screen sharing it is. All it is having a document or a website, whatever you want to share, open on your screen, and then that person can share it with everybody else. I can use it in the main room like I'm using now with all of you. And then in individual breakout rooms, you can have students share. So for example, let's say there was some template or a form that you wanted filled out from that group. Well, then the students could share the document on their screen and they could all fill it out together, okay? And that's something that you might want to do in a screen share. Annotation, which all of you loved using your stamps a while ago, you can actually annotate on the PowerPoint slide, or I can actually bring up a whiteboard, just like in your classroom, a plain old whiteboard, and people can write on the whiteboard just like they could in class. So I could have a student demonstrate something in real time on the whiteboard. And then lastly, another engagement tool that we really like to use with students are polls. Polls can be done in advance or during the meeting. You can use a Zoom poll, but you could also use free polls like Poll Everywhere or SurveyMonkey. You know, Kahoot has polls. You can do lots of different ways of doing polls. But I did want to let you know that Zoom actually has a poll built inside of it that can set up. But these are 3 common ways to get students to engage with you in synchronous classroom teaching. Why are we talking about all these tools in Zoom? Why are we talking about this? This is the reason. Because in these settings, we have to use brain-based teaching techniques. And in brain-based teaching techniques, what we know is we have to change activities approximately every 15 minutes, give or take, okay? So we can't sit. That's why I've had you go to the chat. I've had you annotate. I've had you go to breakout. I gave you a 5-minute break. These are all things that we have to do for our students. Sitting in a virtual environment can be overwhelming if you just sit and sit and sit. So we've got to make sure that the students are doing a different type of activity about every 15 minutes. It doesn't mean that you can't lecture. It doesn't mean that you can't demonstrate something. It's just you only have about 15 minutes to do it. Then you need to give them something to do, and then you can come back to something else, okay? So I like to remind people about that it's about how old students are and our attention span and what we're engaged in. So I told you a little bit about screen sharing. You can limit who shares. I highly recommend that you do this. In the main setting right now, none of you can screen share. And that's because I don't want students just interrupting what I'm teaching and pulling up something. So you don't want that to happen, which, by the way, my husband's a teacher and this happened to him. So it was not a fun experience. I can tell you some funny stories in the Q&A afterwards of what happened. So you can limit it in the main room, but allow it in the breakouts. And that's what I've done for you all. We limit it in the main room, but in the breakouts, you can share a screen. I really encourage this because, as you guys know, whenever you do group work, it's important to have an outcome. It's important to have a product. And so you can give them some kind of an article. They can read an article and highlight and annotate an article. You could give them a graphic organizer and have them talk about and collaborate on what they read. There's lots of different options here, but they need something to share in their breakout so that it keeps them focused on the activity. I do want to give you some cautions. There is a difference between sharing your screen and sharing an app or a document. So when you screen share, it'll say, do you want to share the PowerPoint or do you want to share your screen? As a teacher, I share the PowerPoint. And it's not that there's anything wrong with my screen, but in the background, I don't want you seeing my emails that are popping up and telling me what's going on. I don't want you to see the 20 things that I have open, ready to go in my background. It's just distracting. So there is a difference between screen share and document or app share. And you have to be the host, co-host, or given rights to see the green share button. So just reminding you of those little texts and tools. Things that students may want to share or you may want students to share. It doesn't matter if you're a Google person or a Microsoft person, it really doesn't matter. They're the same types of things. You might want a document or a Word document or a Google Doc to be shared. That's a great thing for them to look at together. If you're a business teacher, you may be using Excel or Google Sheets. Those are good things to share. PowerPoint or Google Slides, again, that's the same thing. And any kind of forms that you develop, any kind of templates or forms, these would be typical items that you would want students to have in front of them during a breakout session. We talked about annotating. When you get permission to screen share, one of the choices is whiteboard. If you look at the right-hand side of your screen right now, that's what the choice looks like. It simply says whiteboard. And you can click on that and you will get a completely blank screen that you can do anything with. Now, one thing that I like to remind teachers with whiteboard, whiteboards are savable, but you have to teach the students how to save them if you want them saved. If I end the breakout room and they haven't saved their whiteboard, then guess what? It's gone. It's lost. So if you want them to use a whiteboard and save their work, you have to teach them how to do that. And I will tell you in Zoom, when you save whiteboards, they go to this weird file. You have to find it. It goes to a Zoom folder in your documents and it saves it there. But sometimes it's a struggle for people to find. You've already learned, you can annotate on PowerPoint slides, but if you annotate on a PowerPoint slide, it does not save. You would have to do a screenshot. You would have to learn how to do a screenshot to save it. But it does not automatically save because you're annotating on the screen, not physically on the PowerPoint, so it won't save that annotation. Anything else about annotating on that, Kathleen, that you think I'm missing or want to add? We're good? Okay. So again, I want to remind you about where annotate is. It is at the top usually in view options, and that toolbar comes up. Before I had you use stamp, but I want to go over the other tools. You have a text option where you can type, you have a draw, you have an arrow, you can change the colors and the fonts. And then if you go all the way to the right, that's where you can save it. See that? So if you're in a whiteboard, you can click save and it will save the work that they've done. So we're gonna practice using annotate one more time, but this time we're not gonna use a stamp. I want you to use the text tool, and I want you to add a positive word to this jar that starts with the first letter of your name. So if you have struggles, ask your question in chat. I'm not gonna go over the directions because this is a test to see if you can go remember how to find annotate. Look at everybody go. Now, keep going. I want everybody to type. I want you to see one of the problems with annotate because I like to show the barriers. If you have a large class, they type over each other. See that? But as the host, look what I can do. You should be able to see me moving people's words around. So that is one downside, is that people can type over each other. See? Just letting you know that. But all I did was on my button, I have a select on my annotate bar, and I can move everybody's around. So again, I like to show teachers, you have control. You have control of that annotate. I can also I can erase somebody's if it's not good. If I don't like it, if it's inappropriate, I can erase it. I can get rid of it. And there's all kinds of things I can do. So way to go. Look at all those positive words. So I'm moving around. And I love, by the way, I love 3 of you changed your font color. You got tired of the blue. Kudos. You got a pink and a red and a green. I love y'all. All right. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to turn off your annotation bar because I'm going to clear it. If I wanted to save this, I would go to the right-hand side and save on the annotate bar, and this would be saved forever for my class. Except if I'm doing it on a whiteboard. On PowerPoint, it may not be, so you got to be careful. On PowerPoint, I would have to take a screenshot. So just letting you guys know that, clearing everything. All right, I'm getting out of Annotate, and we're going on to the next screen. So we talked a little bit about polls, and we're going to attempt to do a poll right now. All right. And I love that. By the way, Kathleen, that was a great thing you put in the chat. How fun would this be for students to label technical diagrams with Annotate? Yes, thank you. Exactly. Polls are really good, again, for checking in with students. You have lots of options for poll, but I would like, I just realized, I think that I am now, Kathleen, you're host. So do you have access to the poll? Because you're a host. So.
I do.
Thank you. She's going to launch a poll that I would like you all to participate in, and I want to show you how it works.
All righty. Ready?
Yep. There we go.
Ooh.
Look at that. Look how many people are coming in on that poll, Kathleen.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Can you see what I see?
Perfect. Yes.
Ooh, there's like, it's like neck and neck.
It is.
Breakout rooms, screen share, annotate, chat's got a little out front there. Excellent. Excellent.
So as the teacher, you can set up any poll you want. This is a great way to get a little formative assessment in the middle of a session to check for understanding. And Kathleen can press in poll, and she can share the results with everybody. And so that's how you see how many people answered each one. Now for Zoom, this is an anonymous poll, but you can do it to where you can see responses and so forth. It's in settings. And again, if you want high-tech poll ability, you can go to one of the poll apps or services. But this is just a great one, and you can go ahead and close out of that if it's still on your screen. But it's a great way to get feedback from students while you're in Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to transition over to Zoom and Teams and talk about these commonalities and differences, because why everyone says, well, you know, West Virginia is a team state, so why are we doing this in Zoom? There's different reasons. I do like to tell people when it comes to Zoom and Teams, they are both ways to communicate. We don't pick one over the other. The difference for us as an organization is that Teams are typically closed to a small group. So the reason you use it is it's closed with just the team members. Zoom has more of a public forum. I can invite people to a Teams meeting. I still have that option, but sometimes people have found it to be a little bit more difficult. So that's why we are doing this session in Zoom. It's only because it's easier to get it out to more people. Everything that we do in Zoom has a way to be done in Teams. So I'm going to show that cross connection. For those of you who love the history of things, I'm just going to tell you the history real quick. Zoom was started by a guy from WebEx, from the original WebEx, and he created Zoom for a university. So this started at the university level. Teams was created for businesses so that they could communicate within a business. So what I like to tell people right now in education, we're kind of caught in the crosshairs. We're education and business right now, and we're doing both. So it's okay. You tend to have to know both as we go through this. So guess what? Here's the really cool thing. This is a Teams toolbar. And I want everybody to take a look at the Teams toolbar. You're going to notice how similar it is to the Zoom toolbar. Take a look. You have controlling your video options, controlling your audio options. They're actually just flip-flop. Zooms are in the other order. That's it. Guess what? There's that darn ellipsis again. The 3 dots. You still have things in the more. You've got the, I missed the share. You have the ability to share screen. There's the chat room. You can see the participants. So again, honestly, once you learn one tool, you should see that the way that we can take those skills, right, just like we do in CTE, and put them into another meeting platform. It's the same skills that we're using in both platforms. So that toolbox is very, very similar.
Hey, Amy.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just think we have a raised
Go ahead,
hand.
Kathleen.
Could I ask if we can,
No,
option pathways? Oh, I can't see her name. I'm sorry, or his name.
Trisha.
It's Tricia.
Yep, thank you.
Hi. Well, this is actually going back to the annotate and that save option. If we do select save, where does it save? Does it?
Good question.
If you will stay on at the end of this, I'll be happy to kind of explain it in more detail, because it is a little, the first time it ever saved for me, it was so confusing. But basically, Zoom creates what's called a Zoom folder in my documents on your computer.
Okay.
So you'll find it there, but I can show you in more detail if you want to find it then.
Okay. Is that the same way with the recording? Does it save in the same, like if you record the meeting?
When you're in Zoom settings, it asks you if you want to record the meeting to the cloud or if you want to record the meeting to your computer. So you have to decide that. And yes, if you record it to your computer, then it comes to a download and you put it in the file you want to put it in.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Great questions. Love those questions. So as we get to Teams, again, the same things are the skills are transferable. You can now see the toolbar is very similar. What will happen in Teams is you can have multiple teams. So for example, you could have a team for every class you teach, or you could have a team for just CTE teachers, or you could just have all, whatever kind of team you want, but you can create multiple teams, and these would be your working groups, the groups, the classes, the collaboration groups, however you want to do that. Within each team, you can control the settings, just like Zoom, right? Just like Zoom. So look at all this. You can do member permissions, yes permissions. There's all these things that you can set up in your settings on what you want people to be able to do while they're in Teams. Under a team, you want to add a channel. Channel is what a breakout room is Zoom. So breakout room in Zoom is the same as a channel in Teams, if that makes sense. That's the kind of rollover. Now, I'm going to get a little bit happy on Zoom just for a second. I'm just going to keep it real. Zoom breakouts are much easier than Teams channels. Much easier. However, I'm going to do a plug. Teams is getting ready to update a whole bunch of stuff to make their breakout rooms, their channels easier. So I'm doing a plug for them. So don't worry about it, but I do tell everybody that yes, they have what's called channels, but teachers in general have a little bit more difficulty navigating the channel than they do the breakout room sometimes. But the cool thing about Teams, if you look at this screen, is that in your team, you can post all of your files right there. You can have everything you want in a one-stop shop within the team. So you can create all these links up top. You'll see posts, you can have chats, you can have files, you can create, and they have a plus tab. So you can create all these things for your team. And then I can create as many channels within a team that I want to. So the nice thing about it is they can be preset. So let's say you have a class of 20 and you want the same group of 4 to work together all semester. Well, they can all be in a channel and set up that way. So it works. It works perfectly well. Here's there's a close-up of the uploading and sharing files. They can upload and share files within Teams. Anybody can do this. You can download a file, so you can edit it right into Teams, or you can add something to your files while you're in Teams. But this has been my favorite thing that I have found so far when I'm working in Teams, and that is the Zoom integration. You can actually be in Teams and pull up a Zoom meeting while you're in Teams. So if you're like me and you prefer to teach in Zoom, I can go into Teams, and if you look at the bottom of this screen, right here in the chat box in my Teams, all I did was I typed the @ symbol and Zoom. I didn't even finish spelling Zoom. I put ZOO and Zoom popped up. And then I clicked on Zoom, and then all of a sudden it asked me, do you want to start a Zoom meeting now, or do you want to schedule a Zoom meeting for later? So you can do Zoom within Teams. If you look at this and say, hey, Amy, that's cool, but I tried to do it and it doesn't work, just talk to your IT department. I had to talk to our IT department, and what I found out is I needed to load ZoomBot, and they did it like this in 5 seconds. And there's actually in your action agenda, there's a link to the YouTube video that shows you how to integrate Zoom into Teams. It is literally like a 5-minute or 6-minute video, and I learned it very, very fast. So if you like to use Zoom, you can do it in Teams. Kathleen, you want to add to that?
No, I think that's really helpful. I just encourage, because we know that West Virginia does promote Teams. Oh, thank you, Ron. Mr. Odom is doing a shout out to the IT team, and I believe that's Mr. McLean that he's shouting out to, who's yet another character at Rumsey. You would not forget him if you met him, Amy, I'm telling you. So thank you, Ron, for that. I do encourage that, you know, we didn't approach this in Zoom to confuse you. The idea was that Amy's right. It tends to be, Zoom tends to be a little more user-friendly when it comes to organizations collaborating. And so we felt like this was the most reliable platform, but it's great because once you get comfortable with the bells and whistles on this, it's the same, virtually almost the same as Teams. And then you can, if you want to stay with Zoom, Amy said, as she showed you, you can bot it. You can just bot it right in there and do both until Teams comes up with a little slicker strategy in terms of breakouts. So we were just trying to kind of bridge that gap for you. Thank you.
And just so people understand, when I say Teams was created for business, see, you can imagine in the business world, Teams is really cool because you can have a department as a team and they can put all their files in the department. But that business team may not, at least pre-COVID, may not have the need to be collaborating live, right? And so that's why the education field, we've been using Zoom more because we have that relationship need to be live and collaborative. So it's a different feel, that's all there is. So we're gonna do one more breakout, and if Kathleen will help out there with that, one more breakout. We're gonna kind of just do a debrief a little bit in our breakouts. Positives and challenges about all the virtual tools you've seen today. And now here's where I'm gonna let you have student voice and choice. Each group's TechnoScribe has 2 options. You can either share a whiteboard. So if you wanna be brave and you wanna go in your breakout and you wanna click share screen and share a whiteboard, then everybody in your group can add positives and challenges, okay? And you can even save screen and take a screenshot of it. Option B, you could share screen and pull up a blank Word document on the side. Just pull up a blank Word document and share the Word document, and a TechnoScribe can type everybody's responses for them, okay? But I don't want a low-tech option. This is an intermediate tech option. We've graduated since the beginning of this session, okay? We want you guys to use a techie. So TechnoScribe is going to share the screen. It's either going to be a whiteboard or a blank Word document. You decide
Right.
what to do. And when we come back, we want you to share the positives and challenges about the virtual tools you've learned and seen today. So Kathleen, if you'll give them, they're only going to get about 5 minutes. Let's give them 5 minutes and we'll come back and wrap it up. Okay?
Okay, sounds good. Ready?
Great.
Go. See you, folks. Let's see those whiteboards. Woohoo!
I know, I hope. I'm crossing my fingers. I know they can do it.
Oh, yes.
He does.
Yeah, he like blends in. He's like the headless. He's like the headed man, the talking head. Here we go. All right, let's see what's happening.
All right, as you're coming back from your room, we know it was short. The whole purpose of it was just to see if you could get back in there and if anybody could share their screen. So I would love to hear if there's someone willing to talk about their experience in sharing their screen, and if they were successful, we'd love to hear what y'all talked about.
Who do we have?
A group that was successful in sharing screen?
Group 6 was successful. It was insanity.
Group
So,
4
so
was
tell me about group 6. Did y'all choose whiteboard or a Word doc?
I chose whiteboard because I like it. I told them that I'm in course 1 for the aerospace engineering, and my instructor uses, I guess, kind of like whiteboard. Whenever I have a question, he'll go into the document and he uses snippet to cut out the problem and put it onto a whiteboard. And then I feel like an idiot, but I like the old school stuff where the instructor walks you through the process little by little. And I like the whiteboard because that's what he does. He does it step by step. And then he's also smart in that he records it. And I'm old and forgetful. So I like the fact that he records it, because then I'm like, oh man, we did that 2 months ago and I don't remember how to do that. So I put it in my resources folder, and I always go back to that so that I don't feel like such an idiot.
Great job, and thank you for the shout out for Snippet. That's just a cool tool. I have it on the bottom of my computer all the time. I can't tell you, as a teaching tool, I snip everything and copy the picture in, so that's always helpful. Anybody else willing to share what they talked about or any of their positives or their
All right.
I know, there's not anybody else. It looks like they may have.
I mean, I shared
able to
that,
do it.
this is Bob Ball. I shared that when I was in the IT industry, I couldn't keep adults to pay attention and not multitask. And so I think that would be the biggest thing, is the distractions. And, you know, if there's a second, I mean, I've got 3 monitors in front of me now, but I'm looking at you, but it'd be easy not to, right? So,
Yeah, and Bob, thank you for saying that. I tell everybody at SRD has heard me say this a million times. I am so overstimulated by doing this. Like, if y'all saw what was open on all of my monitors, it would be the same way.
Mm.
And I think that's why I want to reiterate about sharing screens is so important, because you have, like that agenda I gave you, you have to plan ahead and you have to give them some kind of graphic organizer or tool so that they are focused on one thing to complete during that breakout. It's very, very important.
well, your advice on shifting something every 15 minutes, I wish I'd have known that when I was working with adults.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, one
Yes.
thing to remember with adults is you've got a lot of undiagnosed ADD there. You know, a lot of people who went through school and never knew what to call it. They were just daydreaming.
It's true.
So you're working
That's
with
me.
them now.
Yeah.
Yep, that's me. So just one final tip as we finish off this session, and you know, virtual cannot replace the development of relationships. We can't put kids on a virtual setting and think that we're going to still have the same types of relationships. So you have to do intentional things to build those relationships with your students. So use some of those activities. We did like bell ringer activities. Let them use emojis and share pictures. Do the polls, do the quotes or the feedbacks. Let them use memes. You've got to build these into your sessions, because if it's just all go, 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 like Bob was saying all the time, it's just overwhelming. So we need to stop and make sure that we do that in our sessions. So as we conclude this session, in the chat box, I would love for you to just answer for us a plus about this session, a delta about something you might change because of this session, something you might change, and assistance that you still think you need with some of the tools we discussed. So this is our PDA reflection, but the appropriate kind of PDA, of course. And we want you just in the chat box to put a plus from the session, something you think you might change about your teaching because of the session, and something you still need help with. Now, I do want to say we had a great question a while ago about text-to-speech, because believe me, we need to talk about students with disabilities. We need to talk about access and equity. In a minute, I'm going to share how that's done. So anybody who has real assistance questions that you want answered today, Kathleen and Marty and I are be glad to answer those in just a second. So Kathleen, you want to share out any of the plus delta assistance from the chat?
Sure. And Marty might pick up a few that I didn't, but definitely the breakouts seem to be really enjoyable, and they see those as value added. Smart boards, right? The whiteboard, smart board idea. So being able for students to communicate, right? Just put out their thoughts, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Great. Marty, see anything I didn't catch? I'm sure there's a few. It goes fast. Yeah, I think we're good. Oh, some more. There's some more coming in now. So assistance or things that you're not sure about. Yeah, probably not sure exactly all I will need until I get into this form of instruction. Absolutely. It's really that's the best way, right? You get in and you're sort of like seeing, oh, I have a need, and how am I going to fit that need? Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And somebody said they wished it was in Teams, and I think, Kathleen, that's good feedback for the State Department, and I know they're planning on doing some Teams specific things. And just so people understand, it's really hard when you're not in the same organization to work in Teams, and that's the reason why we didn't do it, because we don't, at SREB, we don't have access to West Virginia Teams. So this is more of a global perspective, but I know that they're talking about that. So thank you for that feedback.
Yes. And we do want to give a shout out to the West Virginia Department of Ed folks that joined us, so they can also take that feedback. And there's several of them that have already offered up, like they can, if these folks want to have a session with them in particular around any teams, they can we'll feel free to connect them. We'll set them up for that. So, yep.
So I know the next session, I hope you're going to join, but if you may not be, but the next session that's being offered is the CTE instruction for learning in a virtual environment. Woo! But the main hope you got from this is that you have more confidence around the tools. And even if you're using them in other platforms, that now you know what to look for. Now you know what is possible, so that you can ask those specific questions of what you need to learn and what can be done. Because what we want is engaging instruction for your students at the end of the day. So you have hopefully a little more confidence in building that for them. So we want to say thank you to everybody for participating. At this point, we are finished with this session, but Kathleen, Marty, and I are going to hang back for a little bit and answer some questions. And thank you all again. If you have questions, if you'll put those in the chat, or you can unmute and ask those. Otherwise, you can just leave the meeting if you're finished.
Mr. Gerda. Yep, thanks. Great to see everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you for another great session. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Mr. Tetrick. Thank you. Awesome.
Okay, so
Really nice group.
Kathleen,